Tell you that. All right, so let me ask you a question. One question. That's this one. What is the world's longest running Broadway show? Cats. You know, it's a good thing you asked me that, or you had that answer, because I got the answers right here. And if you told me Cats, I would say you'd be wrong. Give me another one. Phantom of the Opera. And if you said Phantom of the Opera, guess what I'd tell you? You'd be wrong too. Anybody else got a better shot? The Producers. If I told you it was the Producers, I would also be wrong. That isn't even in the running. Rent. It wouldn't also be in the running. Chorus Line. Well, it's in the top 50.
The Mousetrap.
The Mousetrap is in the top 50 as well. In fact, I think that's number 47.
Wow.
The longest running Broadway show is right here, Les Mis. Les Mis, in case you didn't know, has been running for 21 years. Now, I got another part of the quiz, and that is this. What is the longest running... Oh, you didn't change that. Okay, that's all right. What is the longest running show in terms of number of productions? The most amount of productions on Broadway today. Now, you gave me the answer, and it wasn't the Mousetrap, and it wasn't Cats. If you said Phantom, you would be right. Phantom of the Opera, just so you know, has run, as of last night, 8,157 performances. It has opened January 26th, 1988. Soon it will be the longest running show on Broadway. But it's not now. Now my question is this: what does this have to do with B&I? What does all this have to do with B&I? So let me give you a little hint. When this show here, Phantom of the Opera, opened on January 26, 1988, guess what? They started with the very same note as they did last night. The orchestra hit the very same note when they showed up and started their performance last night as they did on January 26th. In fact, when they ended their performance last night, it was the same exact note that they hit. I'm going to tell you this. How many people know how many productions of Phantom of the Opera are currently running in the world right now? 17 productions are currently running a Phantom of the Opera right now. And you know what? Every one of those shows, whether it was a touring show that showed up at Shays a few weeks ago or a few months ago, or if it was a show that was actually on Broadway or that's running on Broadway last night, or if it's a show that's running in Japan, or if you go up to Toronto, they started and they ended with the same exact note. The actors came out at the same exact moment. They started their lines at the same exact time. Nobody had any opportunity to fake it. They didn't. There was no faking going on. Doesn't matter if we're talking about Les Mis. Doesn't matter if we're talking about Phantom. Doesn't matter what we're talking about. Those shows were there for one reason. The same reason, by the way, that you show up every week at B&I. Those shows exist to make money. You're showing up at B&I to make money. But when you show up, you're there for a reason. Can anybody tell me why we show up at our meetings Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday every week? Why? Why do we show up? What is it? Oh, work with me. You know, somebody's got to give me another answer. You show up to put on a show. You're absolutely right. You're there to put on a show. Now, the question I got to ask you is this. Why do we meet? We talked about that. We're there to put on a show. Who is the star of the show? The president. Absolutely the president. And if we look at our cast, there is one star, and he is the president. Why is the president the star of the show? Because he stands up and everybody gets to see him. And then he sits down. And then he stands up. And then he sits down. And then he stands up. He runs that show. People come to see that show. And he's in charge of it. Now, just because we have a star in the show doesn't mean that there aren't other things that are supposed to be going on. For example, we have a supporting cast. Who's on our supporting cast? Our vice president. The vice president has some very, very, very specific things that he has to do, right? The vice president has to make sure that he's got his reports done. Why is that so important? Is it to tell Nancy how many referrals we gave? No. You know why? Because Nancy doesn't really care. But who does care? Our visitors care how many referrals came up. So that's why that actor has to make sure that his part of the show is absolutely perfect. Absolutely. Now we have other supporting cast members. Who else are the other supporting cast members? Secretary Treasurer. They've got a part too. Who else is a supporting cast member? Auxiliary. Who else? Membership committee. Who else? Educational. The educational coordinator has a solo, doesn't he? He gets to get up there now. By the way, do you think that it would make sense when they showed up at Les Mis to like, whoo, practice that solo? Well, maybe not practice that solo, just kind of wing it. No, because everyone is there and the show is revolving around that individual right at that absolute minute. And so that show better be perfect. He better be planned, he better be presented, he better be ready to do his part of the show. But we have other people in our product too, don't we? We have ushers. We have ushers in our show. Who's our ushers? The visitor host. Harry, it's a pleasure to meet you. Come on in. I'd like you to meet the president of the chapter. Harry was actually going to be the president of the chapter. The visitor hosts, the visitor hosts are there specifically to make sure that those visitors feel welcome. Just like in a show, if you go down to Broadway and you see the ushers and they take you to your seats. Are our visitor hosts taking us to our seats? In the end, if you take them to the seat right away, how does that affect our show? Doesn't affect it very well, right? There they are sitting. But we need to make sure that they feel welcome. Now, who else do we have? We have a production crew in our show, don't we? Who's on our production show? Who's on our production crew? Who's in that? Our PR coordinator, absolutely. There's a good person. Who else? How about the guy who's in charge of the business card box? See, what happens if the crew on Broadway doesn't do the show? So the actors are supposed to swing through the air, and there's supposed to be a rope there for them to catch, right? Whoops, the crew forgot about it. So what happens? How's that working? They're supposed to make sure that the orchestra can actually be heard, but the production crew forgot to show up, and so nobody can hear the orchestra. You have a production crew in your show. It's the guy who takes care of the business card box. It's the guy who goes around and says, you don't have a name tag on. It's a guy or a woman who goes around and says, hey, by the way, you owe us our money. And we got to get that. We've got to make sure that our production crew is doing the job that they're supposed to do. Because guess what? If the production crew doesn't do it, they forget to fill up the business card box, how does that make the star of the show look? Terrible. How does that affect you? What is the review that your show is going to get? Exactly. So who else? We have a production crew. What else do we have going on? A show does absolutely no good unless you have a show to put on. Unless there's somebody to see. How many people have been to a meeting and there's been no visitors? Well, by the way, if the audience doesn't show up, what happens to the show? It fails. It closes. You make no money. And by the way, your chapter is exactly the same way. If your visitors don't show up, guess what? You're not making any money. This is your marketing plan, ladies and gentlemen. You're here to make money. And if you don't have visitors there, guess what? You got no money coming. How is that working for your chapters? You're here to make a show. You're here to make sure that this goes off the way it does. We have a structure. We follow the agenda for a reason. because as you go through with the agenda, you'll see there's all kinds of hidden elements, and those hidden elements are there specifically to make sure that our visitors are seeing value. So make sure that they're getting what they need to make a decision. That's why, by the way, for example, when we go through and we say, visitors, I'd like you to stand and tell us what you thought of the meeting. Why is that important? Well, there's a hidden element to that. What did you think of the meeting? Invariably, I was the president of Buffalo's First. We used to meet in this very room. Sometimes there would be 90 people in this room. 90 people. And invariably, they would go around the room and they would say, why? What did you see that was of value of this group? And they'd say, wow, I like the referrals. Wow, I like this. Wow, I like that. Wow, I can see how this would be helpful. Wow, you guys certainly are structured. I like the way this moved. Blah, 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 blah. And guess what? Then we turn around and we say to you, well, I'm glad that's what you liked about it, because we need someone in your profession. And guess what? Here's our application, because if you don't join our show, guess what? Your competition's sitting right there, and they're going to join. But if they see no value, if they don't see that that show goes off perfectly, what are they going to say? Oh, my competition's here? Yeah, good luck to you. Have a good time over that show. Because I ain't going to that show. I'm going to a different Broadway show. You're there to put on a show. You're not there to get referrals. See, you already have relationships amongst each other. You will get referrals from each other because you have relationships. You're there to put on a show. That's why you meet Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday every week, so that you can be the longest running Broadway show. I think it's time for a break. Very short one.
Before you all go, I'll tell you where we're going to do.